The steam whistle screamed through the morning air as Lucy Barrett pressed her gloved hand against the train window, watching Boston fade into memory while her future hurtled toward her at 50 miles per hour. She was 22 years old, a certified teacher with a leather satchel full of books and a heart determined to make a difference in the Western Territories. Though the telegram crumpled in her reticule told a different story than the one she had imagined. When she accepted the teaching position in Las Vegas, Nevada. The year was 1882, and the Transcontinental Railroad had been carrying dreamers westward for more than a decade. Lucy had spent the last 3 days watching the landscape transform from the green hills of Massachusetts to the endless plains of the Midwest. And now, the terrain grew increasingly barren as they pushed into Nevada territory. She had read every book she could find about the West, about the mining towns and cattle ranches, about the rough men who carved civilization from the wilderness, but nothing had prepared her for the actual vastness of it all. Her traveling companion, an older woman named Mrs. Henderson, had departed the train in Kansas City, leaving Lucy alone with her thoughts and the rhythmic clacking of wheels on rails. She pulled out the telegram again, smoothing the wrinkled paper against her skirt. Position available, 20 students, housing provided, arrive September 10th. It was now September 9th, and she would reach Las Vegas by tomorrow afternoon if the schedule held. Lucy tucked a strand of honey-blonde hair back into her carefully pinned bun and tried to imagine what awaited her. She had grown up in a world of tea services and piano lessons, of literature discussions and proper manners. Her father, a banker, had been furious when she announced her intention to become a teacher out west. Her mother had wept. But Lucy had always felt there was something more waiting for her beyond the carefully prescribed life of a Boston lady, something wild and real and true. The train lurched suddenly, throwing her against the window. Shouts erupted from outside, and Lucy pressed her face to the glass to see what was happening. 3 riders galloped alongside the train, their horses' manes flying in the wind. For a heart-stopping moment, she thought they might be bandits, but then she noticed they were whooping and hollering in what seemed like pure exuberance rather than menace. One of them, a tall man in a black hat, stood up in his stirrups and waved his hat at the train before peeling away with his companions. Showing off for the passengers, an elderly gentleman across the aisle muttered, but he was smiling. Cowboys. More spirit than sense, most of them. Lucy watched until the riders disappeared into the sagebrush-dotted landscape. Something about the sight stirred something in her chest, a recognition of the freedom she had been seeking without quite knowing it. The train continued westward through the afternoon and into the evening. Lucy ate a modest dinner in the dining car, where she endured the curious stares of other passengers. Single women traveling alone were still unusual enough to draw attention, especially young, pretty ones heading into rough territory. She held her head high and answered polite inquiries with the simple truth. She was a teacher, going to educate the children of Las Vegas. That night, she dozed fitfully in her seat, dreaming of classrooms and children's faces, of wide open spaces and men on horseback. When she woke in the gray light of dawn, the landscape had transformed into something almost otherworldly. The Sierra Nevada mountains rose in the distance, and the high desert spread out in all directions, dotted with Joshua trees and sagebrush. The air coming through the cracked window was dry and warm, nothing like the humid summers of Boston. The train made several stops throughout the morning at small settlements that barely deserved the name of town. At each one, Lucy watched people disembark to start their new lives, carrying everything they owned in trunks and carpetbags. She wondered what stories they carried with them, what hopes and fears drove them westward. It was mid-afternoon when the conductor walked through the car announcing Las Vegas as the next stop. Lucy's stomach clenched with nervousness. She gathered her belongings, checking that everything was in order. She had 2 large trunks in the baggage car containing her books, clothes, and teaching supplies. Everything she owned in the world fit into those 2 trunks and her traveling case. The train began to slow, and Lucy got her first glimpse of Las Vegas, Nevada. It was bigger than she had expected, with several streets of wooden buildings, a proper main street with storefronts, and what looked like at least 2 hotels. The train station itself was a sturdy wooden structure with a covered platform. As the train hissed to a stop, Lucy saw a small crowd waiting, and she wondered if anyone had come to meet her. She stepped down onto the platform, grateful for the conductor's steadying hand. The heat hit her immediately, a dry warmth that made Boston's summer humidity seem like a distant memory. She looked around, uncertain what to do next, when a woman in a practical brown dress approached her. "Miss Barrett, I am Mrs. Patricia Weaver, the mayor's wife. We have been expecting you." The woman was perhaps 40, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put Lucy at ease. "Thank you for meeting me," Lucy said, relieved not to be left stranded. "Your trunks?" Mrs. Weaver asked, and when Lucy pointed them out, she signaled to a young man who began loading them onto a wagon. "The schoolhouse is on the edge of town. It is modest, but it has living quarters attached. The previous teacher left rather suddenly 3 months ago, so things may be a bit dusty." As they walked toward the wagon, Lucy tried to take in everything at once. Las Vegas was a bustling town, much livelier than she had anticipated. Men in dusty work clothes moved along the wooden sidewalks, and she heard the distant sound of a piano coming from what was probably a saloon. Women in practical dresses carried baskets, and children ran between buildings, their laughter carrying on the dry air. "We have a population of about 800, Mrs. Weaver explained as they climbed into the wagon. "Mining mostly and cattle ranching, some farming where we can irrigate. It is a good town, respectable for the most part, though we do get our share of rough characters passing through." The wagon jolted forward, and Lucy held onto the side as they navigated the rutted street. She noticed a general store, a bank, a church with a white steeple, a doctor's office, and several other businesses. At the far end of the main street, she could see what looked like cattle pens and a livery stable. "The children," Mrs. Weaver continued, "range in age from 6 to 15. Most of them can read at least a little, though their education has been sporadic. Their parents are good people, working hard to build something here. They want better for their children." Lucy felt a surge of determination. This was exactly what she had come for, to make a real difference in the lives of children who needed her. They turned off the main street onto a smaller road that led toward the edge of town. The schoolhouse came into view, a simple wooden building with a bell tower and large windows. Attached to one side was a smaller structure, presumably her living quarters. It was surrounded by open land, with the mountains visible in the distance. "Here we are," Mrs. Weaver announced as they pulled to a stop. "Let me help you get settled." The living quarters were indeed dusty but surprisingly well appointed. There was a main room with a small kitchen area, a pot-bellied stove, a table and chairs, and even a worn but comfortable-looking armchair. A door led to a tiny bedroom with a brass bed, a wardrobe, and a washstand. Windows on 2 sides let in plenty of light. "The well is out back, Mrs. Weaver explained, and there is an outhouse behind that. Firewood is delivered once a week. The school board pays for it. Your salary is $30 a month, paid at the end of each month. Classes start at 8 in the morning and end at 3 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday. Lucy nodded, taking it all in. $30 a month was less than she would have made in Boston, but here it included housing and firewood. She could live on it if she was careful. "I will leave you to settle in," Mrs. Weaver said. "School starts on Monday, 3 days from now. That should give you time to prepare. If you need anything, my husband and I live in the large white house on Main Street. Do not hesitate to call on us." After Mrs. Weaver left, Lucy stood in the center of her new home and tried to process everything. She was actually here in Nevada, about to start her new life. The enormity of it all suddenly overwhelmed her, and she had to sit down in the armchair to catch her breath. But she did not have time for doubts or fears. She had work to do. She spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking her trunks, arranging her books on the small shelf in the main room, hanging her dresses in the wardrobe, and making the bed with the linens she had brought from home. She swept and dusted until everything was as clean as she could make it, then walked next door to inspect the schoolhouse itself. The main room was larger than she had expected, with rows of benches and desks, a large slate board on one wall, and a teacher's desk at the front. There were primers and slates stacked on shelves, and maps hanging on the walls. Someone had clearly put thought into equipping the school. She ran her hand along the teacher's desk, imagining herself standing here in a few days, facing her students for the first time. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Lucy stood outside and watched the light change across the landscape. The vastness of it still took her breath away. In Boston, buildings hemmed you in, but here the sky seemed to go on forever. She heard a coyote howl in the distance and shivered despite the warm air. That night, she lay in her narrow bed and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the desert night. She thought about her family back in Boston, wondered what they were doing at this exact moment. But she did not regret her decision. She had chosen this path, and she would see it through. Saturday morning, she woke to brilliant sunshine streaming through her windows. After a simple breakfast of bread and jam she had purchased at the general store the day before, she decided to explore the town properly. She wanted to know her new home, wanted to understand the community she would be serving. Las Vegas was already awake and busy when she walked down the main street. She introduced herself to the proprietor of the general store, a friendly man named Mr. Jameson, who assured her he could provide anything she needed. She visited the bank, where she opened an account for her salary. She stopped by the church and met Reverend Thompson, who welcomed her warmly and invited her to Sunday services. As she walked past the livery stable, she heard shouting and the sound of a horse's distressed neighing. Without thinking, she hurried toward the commotion. A crowd had gathered in the corral behind the stable, watching as a man tried to handle a wild-eyed black horse. The horse was magnificent, all muscle and spirit, but clearly terrified or enraged. It reared up, hooves slashing at the air, and the man jumped back just in time to avoid being struck. "That horse is going to kill someone," a woman next to Lucy muttered. "Should just shoot it and be done with it," a man agreed. Lucy felt a surge of indignation. The horse was clearly frightened, not vicious. She was about to say something when a voice called out, "Let me try." The crowd parted, and a man walked forward into the corral. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight. He moved with a grace that reminded Lucy of the riders she had seen from the train, a kind of easy confidence that spoke of countless hours in the saddle. He wore dusty work clothes and a battered hat, and there was something about him that drew the eye and held it. "That is Daniel Everett," the woman next to Lucy whispered. "Best horseman in 3 counties. If anyone can handle that beast, he can." Lucy watched as Daniel approached the horse slowly, his hands loose at his sides. He was speaking, though she could not hear the words from this distance. The horse tossed its head and backed away, but Daniel did not pursue. He just stood there, still talking in that low voice, waiting. Minutes passed. The crowd grew restless, but Daniel did not move, and slowly, impossibly, the horse began to calm. Its ears, which had been flat against its head, pricked forward. It took a step toward Daniel, then another. When it was close enough, Daniel reached out one hand and let the horse smell him. Then, moving as slowly as if he were in a dream, he touched the horse's neck. The crowd let out a collective breath. Someone started to clap, but Daniel shot a look over his shoulder that silenced them instantly. He continued working with the horse, stroking its neck, running his hands down its shoulder, all the while talking in that low, steady voice. After what seemed like an eternity but was probably only 15 minutes, he had a rope around the horse's neck and was leading it around the corral as docilely as a trained mount. "Well, I will be," the man next to Lucy said. "Never thought I would see that horse gentled." As the crowd began to disperse, Lucy found herself lingering. She told herself it was concern for the horse, but truthfully, she wanted another look at the man who had tamed it with nothing but patience and quiet words. When Daniel finally led the horse into the stable and emerged alone, wiping his hands on his pants, she was still standing by the fence. He noticed her, and for a moment their eyes met. His were lighter up close, golden brown with flecks of green, and there was an intelligence in them that surprised her. He touched the brim of his hat in greeting, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "That was remarkable," Lucy found herself saying. "The way you handled that horse." "Just takes patience," he said. His voice was deep and warm, with a slight drawl that spoke of years in the West. "That horse was not mean, just scared. Someone probably treated him rough, and he learned not to trust people. You think animals can be taught to trust again? I know they can." He studied her with open curiosity. "You are new in town, the teacher, right? Miss Barrett. How did you know? Small town. Word travels. Also, you talk like an Easterner." He said it without judgment, just a statement of fact. "I am Daniel Everett. Most people call me Daniel. Lucy Barrett." "Most people call me Miss Barrett, but I think Lucy is fine when I am not in the schoolhouse." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face from handsome to devastating. Lucy felt something flutter in her chest and immediately told herself to ignore it. She had not come all this way to be distracted by a handsome cowboy, no matter how gentle he was with horses. "Welcome to Las Vegas, Lucy," he said. "I hope you will find it suits you." "I am sure I will." She straightened her shoulders, suddenly aware that they had been talking for several minutes and people might notice. "I should go. I have much to do before Monday." "I am sure you do. Good luck with the children. They are good kids, most of them. A little rough around the edges, but good hearts." "Do you have children in the school?" she asked. "No, but I was one of those kids not so long ago. Grew up here before there was even a proper school. We had lessons in the back of the general store when a teacher came through, which was not often." Lucy wanted to ask him more, wanted to know his story, but she simply nodded and said, "Well, thank you for the welcome." She walked back to the schoolhouse, very aware that her heart was beating faster than the walk warranted. She told herself firmly that she was being ridiculous. She had not even been in Las Vegas for 2 full days, and she was already mooning over a cowboy like some character in a dime novel. She had important work to do, a purpose that had brought her across the country. She could not afford distractions. But that night, as she lay in bed, she found herself thinking about the patience in Daniel's hands as he calmed the frightened horse, the intelligence in his eyes, the warmth in his smile. She fell asleep still thinking about him, And if she dreamed of whiskey-colored eyes and gentle hands, she told herself in the morning that dreams did not count. Sunday, she attended services at the small church and met many of the families whose children she would be teaching. They were welcoming, if somewhat reserved with the new Eastern teacher. She learned names and faces, tried to remember which children belonged to which parents. She saw Daniel there, sitting near the back, and when their eyes met across the church, he nodded once in greeting before looking away. Monday morning arrived with nerve-wracking certainty. Lucy dressed carefully in her most professional dress, pinned her hair up severely, and tried to calm the butterflies in her stomach. She arrived at the schoolhouse an hour early, checking and rechecking that everything was in order. She wrote Miss Barrett on the slate board in careful letters. She arranged the primers and slates. She stood at the teacher's desk and tried to imagine herself commanding the attention of 20 students. They began arriving at 7:45, some walking from town, others arriving with parents in wagons. They were a motley group, ranging from tiny 6-year-olds to gangly teenagers who were nearly as tall as Lucy herself. They were dressed in their best clothes, clearly on good behavior for the new teacher, but Lucy could see the wariness in their eyes. How many teachers had come and gone from this schoolhouse? How long would they expect her to last? When the clock struck 8, Lucy rang the bell that hung outside the door. The children filed in and took their seats, the younger ones in front, the older students in back. 20 pairs of eyes stared at her with varying degrees of curiosity, skepticism, and hope. "Good morning," Lucy said, proud that her voice came out steady and clear. "My name is Miss Barrett, and I am honored to be your teacher. I know I am new here and I have much to learn about Las Vegas and about all of you. But I promise you this. I am here because I believe in you, and I believe in the power of education to open doors and create opportunities. If you are willing to work hard and learn, I am willing to teach you everything I know." She saw some of the skepticism fade from their faces, replaced by cautious interest. She spent the first hour learning their names and assessing their skills. As Mrs. Weaver had said, their education was uneven. Some of the older children could read quite well, while some of the younger ones barely knew their letters. But they were all eager, even the ones who tried to hide it behind bored expressions. The day flew by. Lucy taught reading and writing, basic arithmetic and geography. She read aloud from one of her books, a story about knights and castles that had the children leaning forward in their seats. When 3 o'clock arrived, she was exhausted but exhilarated. "Same time tomorrow," she told them as they gathered their things. "And do not forget, practice your letters tonight." They filed out, some of them smiling at her, others still reserved. One little girl, perhaps 7 years old with dark braids and solemn eyes, lingered behind. "Yes," Lucy asked gently. "I liked the story," the girl said shyly. "About the knights. I am so glad. What is your name?" "Emma Carson." "Well, Emma Carson, if you like that story, I have many more I can read to you. Do you like to read yourself?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Then we will make sure you become the very best reader in the whole school." "How does that sound?" The smile that lit Emma's face was worth every mile Lucy had traveled to get here. Over the following weeks, Lucy settled into a routine. Her days were filled with teaching, her evenings with preparing lessons and grading work. She grew to love her students, even the challenging ones who tested her patience. She learned that ranching and mining left little time for education, that many of her students had responsibilities at home that sometimes kept them from school. She learned to be flexible, to meet them where they were rather than where she thought they should be. She also began to feel like part of the community. The parents appreciated her dedication. Mrs. Weaver invited her to tea. Reverend Thompson asked her to help organize a church social. She was becoming Lucy of Las Vegas, not just Miss Barrett, the teacher from Boston. And then there was Daniel Everett. She seemed to run into him everywhere. He would be at the general store when she stopped in for supplies, and they would chat about the weather or the town gossip. He would ride past the schoolhouse on his way to, or from the various ranches where he worked, and he would tip his hat to her if she happened to be outside. She learned that he did not work for any one ranch, but hired himself out to whoever needed him, that he had a reputation for being able to handle any horse, no matter how difficult, that he lived in a small cabin he had built himself on the edge of town. She told herself their encounters were purely coincidental, that it meant nothing that her heart sped up whenever she saw him. She was too busy for romance, too focused on her purpose. But she could not help noticing the way other women looked at him, or the fact that he seemed to have eyes only for polite conversation with her and nothing more. It stung a little, which was absurd. She barely knew the man. One Friday afternoon in late October, a month after her arrival, she was cleaning the schoolhouse after the children had left when she heard a knock on the open door. She turned to find Daniel standing in the doorway, hat in hand, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Daniel," she said, surprised. "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing wrong. I was wondering if I could talk to you for a minute, if you are not too busy." "Of course." She set down the slate she had been wiping clean and gestured to one of the benches. "Please sit down." He sat, his long legs folding awkwardly into the space designed for children. Lucy took a seat at her desk, trying to ignore the sudden racing of her heart. "I have been thinking," he began, then stopped. He turned his hat around in his hands, clearly struggling for words. "This is harder than I thought it would be." "What is?" "Asking you something. I am not usually a man who has trouble with words, but you make me nervous, Lucy Barrett." She stared at him, completely unprepared for this admission. "I make you nervous? You do. You are smart and educated, and you come from a world I do not understand. But I cannot stop thinking about you. I see you in town, and my whole day gets brighter. I ride past here hoping to catch a glimpse of you. I am acting like a fool, and I am too old to be acting like a fool." Lucy's mouth had gone dry. "How old are you?" 26. "Why, I am 22. I was worried you might be much older." She could not believe the words coming out of her mouth, could not believe this conversation was happening. A slow smile spread across his face. "So age is not a concern." "I did not say that. I do not know what I am saying. Daniel, I am a teacher. I have responsibilities. People expect certain behavior from me." "I know that. I respect that. I am not asking for anything improper. I was just wondering if maybe sometime you might let me take you for a ride. Show you some of the country around here. In broad daylight, completely respectable." Lucy knew she should say no. She knew it would be smarter to keep her distance, to focus on her work. But looking at Daniel, at the hope and nervousness in his eyes, at the way he held his hat like it might fly away if he did not grip it tightly enough, she found herself saying, "I would like that." His whole face lit up. "You would?" "I would, but it would have to be on a Saturday or Sunday. Those are the only days I am free. This Saturday, I could borrow a wagon, come get you around 10 in the morning, have you back by supper. I will bring lunch." "That sounds lovely." He stood up, backing toward the door as if he was afraid she might change her mind. "Saturday then. 10 o'clock. I will see you then." After he left, Lucy sat at her desk in the empty schoolhouse and wondered what she had just agreed to. She was going on an outing with Daniel Everett. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Saturday morning, she changed her dress 3 times before settling on a simple blue cotton that was practical but still becoming. She told herself this was not a courtship, just a friendly outing. two people getting to know each other. But her hands shook as she pinned her hair up, and she checked her reflection in the small mirror more times than she cared to count. Daniel arrived precisely at 10, driving a neat wagon pulled by two sturdy horses. He had cleaned up, wearing what were clearly his best clothes, his hair still damp from a recent washing. He helped her up onto the wagon seat with careful courtesy, and they set off. For the first few minutes they rode in awkward silence. Then Daniel said, "I am not very good at this." "At what?" "Courting. That is what this is, right? I am courting you." Lucy felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I suppose you are, and I am not very good at being courted, so we are even." That broke the tension, and they both laughed. After that, conversation came easier. Daniel told her about growing up in Las Vegas when it was barely more than a camp, about learning to ride and rope from the Mexican vaqueros who worked the ranches, about his love for horses and the open land. Lucy told him about Boston, about her family, about her decision to come west. "Were you running from something?" he asked. "Or running towards something?" She thought about that. "Both, I think. I was running from a life that felt too small, too prescribed, and running towards something I could not even name, a feeling that there was more to life than what I had been shown." "Have you found it?" "I think maybe I am starting to." He drove them up into the foothills east of town, where the desert gave way to scattered pines and the air was cooler. They stopped by a small creek, and Daniel spread a blanket in the shade. He had brought sandwiches and apples and a jar of lemonade, and they ate while watching the water tumble over the rocks. "This is beautiful," Lucy said. "I had no idea places like this existed out here. I thought it was all desert." "The desert has its own beauty," Daniel said. "But you have to learn to see it. It does not show itself all at once like the green places back east. You have to be patient with it. Like with horses, like with horses." He looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Like with people sometimes." They talked for hours, about everything and nothing. Daniel asked about her students, and she told him about Emma, who loved to read, about Thomas, who was brilliant with numbers, about Sarah, who could not sit still but had the kindest heart. He listened like her stories mattered, like the children mattered. "You are good at this," he said. "Teaching, you care about them." "Of course I care about them. How could I not? Some teachers do not. They just see it as a job, but you light up when you talk about them." "It is one of the things I like about you." "One of the things," he grinned. "Well, I could list the others, but we might be here all night, and I promise to have you back by supper." Lucy laughed, delighted by his boldness. This was a side of Daniel she had not seen before, playful and flirtatious. It made her want to know all his sides, to discover every facet of the man behind the quiet cowboy exterior. On the drive back to town, as the sun was starting to sink toward the mountains, Lucy found herself filled with a contentment she had not felt in years. Maybe ever. The landscape that had seemed so alien a month ago now felt like home. And the man beside her, guiding the horses with gentle competence, felt like possibility. "Can we do this again?" Daniel asked as he helped her down from the wagon in front of the schoolhouse. "I would like that very much." He smiled, and Lucy realized she was starting to recognize his different smiles. This one was his genuine happiness smile, unreserved and bright. "Next Saturday." "Next Saturday." He tipped his hat and climbed back onto the wagon. Lucy watched him drive away, then went inside to her quiet rooms. But they did not feel lonely anymore. They felt like a place she was choosing, not hiding in. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Lucy's life. She and Daniel fell into a pattern of Saturday outings. Sometimes he borrowed the wagon, and they would drive to different locations around the valley. Sometimes he brought an extra horse, and he taught her to ride, patient with her inexperience, encouraging when she was frustrated. She was not a natural rider like he was, but she was determined, and gradually she improved. They talked about everything. Daniel was far more educated than she had initially assumed. He had read widely, teaching himself from whatever books he could get his hands on. He had a natural curiosity about the world and a thoughtfulness that surprised her. He asked her about literature and philosophy, and she found herself seeing familiar ideas in new ways through his perspective. He told her about his parents, who had died in a fever epidemic when he was 15, leaving him alone in the world. He had survived by working whatever jobs he could find, gradually discovering his gift with horses. He had never attended school regularly, but had learned to read from his mother, who had been a teacher herself back in Missouri. "She would have liked you," he said one afternoon as they sat watching the sunset from a rocky outcrop. "She always said education was the most important thing a person could have, because nobody could take it from you once you had it." Lucy reached over and took his hand. It was the first time they had deliberately touched beyond the necessary help up onto horses or over rough ground. His hand was rough and calloused, but warm, and his fingers curled around hers with gentle strength. "I wish I could have met her," Lucy said. "I wish you could have too." They sat like that until the sun disappeared and the first stars began to emerge. When Daniel finally drove her home, he walked her to her door like he always did. But this time, when they said goodnight, he lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it, his eyes never leaving hers. "Good night, Lucy." "Good night, Daniel." She went inside and leaned against the closed door, her hand still tingling where his lips had touched it. She was falling in love with Daniel Everett. The realization should have terrified her, but instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The town began to notice their courtship, of course. In a place as small as Las Vegas, it would have been impossible to keep it secret even if they had wanted to. Mrs. Weaver made a point of telling Lucy she thought Daniel was a fine young man. Reverend Thompson mentioned something about seeing them together and looking very well suited. Even her students noticed, giggling when Daniel rode past the school, asking Lucy if she had a beau. She did not confirm or deny it, maintaining proper teacher decorum. But inside, her heart sang. It was in mid-November that everything changed. Lucy had been in Las Vegas for 2 months, and she felt fully settled into her life there. The weather had turned cooler, requiring fires in the stove both at school and in her rooms. Her students were making remarkable progress. Several of the older children who had been barely literate were now reading full books. Emma had become her star pupil, devouring every book Lucy could find for her. On this particular Saturday, Daniel arrived looking more serious than usual. "Is something wrong?" Lucy asked as they drove out of town. "Not wrong, exactly. Just something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you before now, but I was afraid it might change how you see me." Lucy's stomach tightened with anxiety. "Whatever it is, you can tell me." He drove them to their favorite spot by the creek before speaking. When they were sitting on the blanket with the lemonade and sandwiches between them, he finally said, "I cannot read very well." Lucy stared at him, confused. "But you said your mother taught you." She started to. "But she died when I was still learning, and after that, I had to work all the time just to survive. I can manage basic things, signs and short notes. But books, like the ones you talk about, I cannot really read them. I have tried, but the words get jumbled up and I lose the thread of it." "Daniel, that is nothing to be ashamed of, I know. But you are a teacher. Education is everything to you, and here I am, a 26-year-old man who can barely read past a first-grade level." He looked down at his hands, unable to meet her eyes. Lucy scooted closer to him on the blanket. "Look at me." When he finally raised his eyes, she saw vulnerability there that made her heart ache. "First of all, you are one of the most intelligent people I have ever met. Reading is just one kind of intelligence. You have a gift with horses, an understanding of the land, a curiosity about the world. Those things matter just as much as being able to read fancy literature. But it bothers you. I can see it does. The only thing that bothers me is that you were denied the education you deserved. That circumstances forced you to survive instead of learn. But that does not reflect badly on you. It reflects badly on a world that did not protect a 15-year-old boy who had just lost his parents." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "There is another reason I told you. I want to learn. I have always wanted to learn, but I did not know who to ask, did not want to admit my ignorance. But if you would be willing, if you would have the patience, I would like you to teach me." Lucy felt tears prick her eyes. "I would be honored to teach you. I can pay you." "Not much, but something." "Daniel Everett, if you try to pay me, I will be very angry with you. Teaching you would not be work. It would be a gift." He smiled then, that bright, genuine smile she loved. "How did I get so lucky as to find you? I think we found each other." They started that very afternoon. Lucy had brought a primer with her, planning to use it for some lesson planning, but now she used it to assess Daniel's current reading level. As he had said, he could manage basic words, but anything more complex gave him trouble. They started with simple sentences, and Lucy was impressed by how quickly he caught on when given patient instruction. "You have been teaching yourself," she said. "I can tell. You have strategies." "I had to. A man needs to be able to read contracts, bills of sale. I have learned to manage, but it has always been a struggle." "Well, it will not be a struggle anymore. We will work on this together, and I promise you, within a few months you will be reading anything you want." From that day forward, their Saturday outings included reading lessons. They would spend an hour or two with books and papers, working on words and sounds and comprehension. Daniel was a dedicated student, practicing during the week with materials Lucy gave him. His progress was remarkable. Within a month, he was reading simple stories. Within 2 months, he was starting to tackle more complex texts, but it was not just the reading that deepened their relationship. It was the trust Daniel had shown her in revealing his vulnerability, and the care Lucy took in never making him feel less than because of it. They grew closer in ways that went beyond attraction, building a foundation of real friendship and mutual respect. It was early December when Daniel asked the question Lucy had been half expecting, half dreading. They were sitting in her schoolroom on a Sunday afternoon, working on a particularly challenging passage from one of her books. Daniel had been getting frustrated, stumbling over words he should have known. Finally, he set the book down and said, "Lucy, I need to ask you something." "All right." "What are we doing here? I do not mean the reading, I mean us. You and me." Lucy's heart began to pound. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I am courting you, or at least I think I am, but we have never talked about what that means, where it is going. And I need to know, because Lucy, I am in love with you. I have been in love with you probably since that first day at the schoolhouse when you said my name and smiled at me. And if there is any chance you might feel the same way, I need to know. Because if you do not, if this is just a pleasant way to pass the time for you, then I need to protect my heart before it is too late." Lucy stood up and crossed to where he sat. She knelt down in front of him so they were eye to eye. "Daniel, it is already too late, for both of us. I am in love with you too." The joy that spread across his face was like sunrise. "You are. I am. I have been fighting it, telling myself it was too soon, that I needed to focus on my work. But the truth is, you are part of my work now. You are part of my life. I cannot imagine this place without you in it." He reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. Lucy Barrett, will you let me court you properly, with the intention of marriage when the time is right? Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. He leaned forward and kissed her, soft and gentle and full of promise. It was Lucy's first real kiss, and it was everything she had ever dreamed a kiss could be. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. I want to do this right, Daniel said. I want to court you properly. Let the whole town see that my intentions are honorable. I want to give you time to be sure. I am sure now. But your family back in Boston, should not I write to your father, ask his permission? Lucy thought about her father, about the angry words they had exchanged when she announced her intention to come west. My father and I are not on good terms. He did not approve of my choices. I am of age, Daniel. I do not need his permission. But would you want his blessing? She thought about that. Someday, perhaps. But right now, I just want to be happy, and you make me happy. They agreed to make their courtship official. Daniel called on Mrs. Weaver and formally asked permission to court Lucy, which made the older woman beam with delight. He started attending more church events and town gatherings, always with Lucy by his side. He even came to the schoolhouse occasionally to help with repairs or to bring firewood, showing the community that he respected Lucy's position and reputation. Christmas was approaching, and Lucy threw herself into organizing a Christmas pageant for the school. Her students were excited, practicing their lines and songs. Daniel built the simple sets they needed, working late into the evenings in the schoolhouse while Lucy rehearsed the children. The night of the pageant, the schoolhouse was packed with parents and townspeople. Lucy's students performed beautifully, and she felt such pride watching them. Emma played Mary in the nativity scene, and she delivered her lines with perfect clarity, her reading lessons paying off. When it was over, the audience erupted in applause. Afterward, as people were filing out, several parents thanked Lucy for her dedication. Mrs. Weaver hugged her and said, "You have made such a difference here. These children are thriving under your care." Daniel was waiting for her after everyone had left, helping her clean up the schoolhouse. "You are amazing," he told her. "The way you connect with those kids, the way you believe in them, it is a gift. They make it easy. They are wonderful children. They are lucky to have you." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "I am lucky to have you." Lucy rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I have something to tell you." "What?" "I got a letter from my mother. She wants to know about my life here, about whether I am happy. She even asked if there was anyone special." "What did you tell her?" "I have not written back yet, but I want to tell her about you. I want her to know that I found everything I was looking for out here. Even if your father disapproves, even then, this is my life, Daniel, my choice. And I choose you." He kissed her then, right there in the schoolhouse where they had spent so many hours together. When they finally pulled apart, he said, "Teach me how to love you right, Lucy. I have never done this before, never felt this way about anyone. I want to be everything you need." She smiled, remembering the title of her favorite romance novel back in Boston. "You already are. You love me by being patient when I am stressed about lesson plans. You love me by respecting my work and my independence. You love me by being honest with me, even when it is hard. You do not need lessons in love, Daniel. You already know how. But I want to do more. I want to build you a house, give you a proper home. I want to marry you and spend every day for the rest of my life making you happy." "Then ask me." He pulled back, looking startled. "Ask you what?" "You know what? Lucy, I do not have a ring yet. I have been saving, but it will be a few more months before I can afford something worthy of you. I do not need a ring right now. I just need to know that you are asking." Daniel knelt down on one knee right there in the schoolhouse, taking her hands in his. "Lucy Barrett, will you marry me? Will you let me love you for the rest of our lives? "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, yes." He stood up and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around while they both laughed and cried. When he set her down, he said, "I will get you a ring as soon as I can, and we will do this properly with an engagement party and everything. We do not need all that. We just need each other." But Daniel insisted on doing things right. Over the next few months, he saved every penny he could. Lucy continued teaching, and their reading lessons continued as well. Daniel's skills improved dramatically. By February, he was reading full novels, and the joy on his face when he finished his first book made Lucy cry. "This is what you gave me," he told her, holding up the book. "You gave me the ability to learn anything I want, to go anywhere in my imagination. How can I ever thank you?" By continuing to learn, by never stopping your curiosity about the world. In March, Daniel presented her with a ring. It was simple, a small diamond in a gold band, but Lucy loved it more than any elaborate jewel from Boston could have been. They announced their engagement at a town gathering, and the community celebrated with them. Even the most reserved townspeople seemed genuinely happy for them. They decided to marry in June, at the end of the school year. That would give them the summer to build a house on a small plot of land Daniel had purchased on the edge of town, close enough to the schoolhouse that Lucy could easily walk to work. He had plans drawn up, showing her where every room would be, asking her opinion on every detail. "It is your home too," he said. "I want you to love it." "I will love it because you built it," she replied. As the school year wound down, Lucy felt a deep satisfaction. Her students had grown so much, not just academically but in confidence and curiosity. She had accomplished what she set out to do, and she had found something she had not even known she was looking for. The wedding was held in the church on a bright June morning. Lucy wore a simple white dress she had made herself, with wildflowers in her hair. Daniel wore a new suit that he was obviously uncomfortable in, but he looked so handsome that Lucy could not stop staring at him. Reverend Thompson performed the ceremony in front of the whole town. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Daniel kissed Lucy with such tenderness that several women in the audience sighed audibly. Lucy felt like her heart might burst from happiness. The reception was held outside, with tables of food contributed by various families. There was music and dancing, and for one night the whole town celebrated love and new beginnings. Emma presented Lucy with a bouquet of flowers she had picked herself, and Lucy hugged her tight, promising that just because she was married did not mean she would stop being her teacher. As the sun set and the celebration wound down, Daniel and Lucy drove out to their unfinished house. They had one room completed, and that was where they would spend their wedding night. Daniel carried her across the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently. "Welcome home, Mrs. Everett," he said. "It sounds strange hearing that name, but I love it." They spent that night learning each other in new ways with tenderness and passion and joy. Lucy had been nervous, but Daniel was patient and gentle, and by morning she felt like they had always been together. Over the summer, they completed the house. Daniel did most of the building, but Lucy helped where she could. They worked side by side, and the house took shape around them. It was modest but well built, with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a parlor, and even a small room that Daniel insisted would be Lucy's study, where she could prepare lessons and keep her books. When school started again in September, Lucy walked to work from her new home, from the house her husband had built with his own hands. She was Mrs. Everett now, but to her students she was still Miss Barrett, and that felt right. She could be both teacher and wife. Daniel continued to work with horses, but he also started reading to improve his opportunities. He began keeping the books for several ranchers who needed someone literate and trustworthy. Between his work and Lucy's salary, they were comfortable, not wealthy, but with everything they needed. That first winter of their marriage was magical. They learned to live together, to navigate the small frustrations and large joys of shared life. Daniel proved to be thoughtful and attentive, always making sure Lucy had what she needed. Lucy discovered she loved taking care of him, loved cooking his favorite meals and mending his clothes, loved the domestic rituals she had once thought would bore her. In the spring of 1883, Lucy realized she was pregnant. She told Daniel one evening after supper, simply saying, "I think we are going to need that second bedroom sooner than we planned." It took him a moment to understand, and then his face transformed with wonder. "A baby! We are having a baby! We are!" He lifted her up and spun her around, just like he had that night in the schoolhouse when she agreed to marry him. "This is the best news I have ever heard, except for when you said you would marry me. That is still the best, but this is a very close second." Lucy laughed and held him tight. "I am scared," she admitted. "I know. But we will figure it out together. We will be good parents, Lucy. I know we will." She taught through the summer, even as her body changed and her students giggled over her growing belly. In September, too close to her due date to continue, she reluctantly handed the school over to a temporary teacher. She hated leaving her students, but she knew she had to. In October of 1883, Lucy gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The labor was long and difficult, but when the doctor finally placed her son in her arms, every moment of pain was forgotten. He had Daniel's dark hair and Lucy's blue eyes, and he was the most perfect thing she had ever seen. They named him William Daniel Everett, after Daniel's father. Daniel was completely besotted with his son, holding him for hours, talking to him in that low, gentle voice he used with frightened horses. Watching her husband with their child, Lucy fell in love with him all over again. She returned to teaching in January, bringing little William with her. She set up a cradle in the schoolhouse, and the older girls took turns rocking him when he fussed. Her students loved having a baby in the classroom, and it became a joke that William was getting the earliest education in Nevada. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Daniel worked, Lucy taught, and William grew. In the evenings, they would sit together in their parlor, Daniel reading aloud while Lucy sewed and William played on a blanket at their feet. These were the moments Lucy treasured most, the quiet domestic peace that she had never known she wanted. When William was 2, Lucy became pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and while she was still anxious, she was less afraid. In the spring of 1886, she gave birth to a daughter whom they named Catherine Rose, after both grandmothers. She had Lucy's blonde hair and Daniel's golden brown eyes, and she was just as perfect as her brother. Lucy had written to her mother over the years, sending updates about her life. Her mother had written back, cautiously at first, but gradually their correspondence had grown warmer. Lucy sent photographs of her children, and her mother sent baby clothes. Her father never wrote, but her mother mentioned that he had mellowed, that he spoke of Lucy sometimes with what might have been pride. It was in the fall of 1887 that Lucy received a telegram saying her father was ill. Her mother begged her to come home to Boston, saying it might be her last chance to see him. Lucy was torn. She had built a life in Nevada, had responsibilities to her students and her family. But Daniel insisted. "Go," he said. "Make peace with him if you can. You will regret it if you do not." So Lucy made the long journey back to Boston, taking the children with her. It was strange being back in the city after 5 years away. Everything seemed so cramped and gray after the open spaces of Nevada. But her childhood home was the same, and her mother met her at the door with tears and open arms. Her father was indeed very ill, confined to his bed. Lucy went to see him, her heart pounding. He looked so much older than she remembered, so frail. When he saw her, tears filled his eyes. "Lucy," he whispered, "my girl, I was afraid you would not come. I am here, Papa." "I was wrong," he said. "I was wrong to be angry with you, wrong to push you away. Your mother has shown me the letters, told me about your life. You are happy. I am very happy. And your husband treats you well. He treats me like I am the most precious thing in the world. Then I am glad. And these are my grandchildren." Lucy brought William and Catherine to meet him. He held Catherine in his arms and a smile crossed his face. "She looks like you did at this age." Beautiful. Over the next week, Lucy and her father talked more than they ever had before. He asked about her teaching, about Daniel, about Nevada. She told him everything, and he listened with genuine interest. When it was time for her to leave, he had made his peace with her choices. "Be happy, Lucy," he told her. "That is all a father should want for his daughter." He died 2 weeks after she returned to Nevada. Lucy grieved, but she was grateful they had reconciled. She named their third child, born in 1889, Henry Michael, after her father. The years passed in a blur of joy and challenge. Lucy continued teaching, becoming one of the longest-serving teachers in Las Vegas history. Daniel's reputation grew, and he was sought after throughout the territory for his skills with horses. He also became known as a learned man, someone who could read and write and keep accounts, all thanks to the lessons Lucy had given him years before. Their children grew. William was serious and thoughtful, with his father's way with animals. Catherine was bright and curious, devouring books just like Emma Carson had years before. Henry was the wild one, always getting into mischief, keeping them all on their toes. Emma Carson herself had gone on to become a teacher, inspired by Lucy. She taught in a school in a nearby town, and she sometimes wrote to Lucy, thanking her for believing in her all those years ago. In 1895, when Lucy was 35 and Daniel was 39, they celebrated their 13th anniversary. Daniel had never stopped reading, and his current passion was poetry. He read her love poems by candlelight, and Lucy felt like the luckiest woman alive. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked her one night as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "Giving up your life in Boston for this?" "Never," she said without hesitation. "This is the life I was meant to live. You are the man I was meant to love." "I still remember the first time I saw you," he said. "You stepped off that train looking so determined and so scared at the same time. I thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I remember seeing you with that horse. I thought you were magic, the way you calmed it. You taught me something that day, even though you did not know it. What did I teach you? That patience and understanding can reach anything, anyone. You showed me with that horse, and then you showed me with yourself. You were patient with me, with my pride and my fears. You taught me how to love you right by letting me learn at my own pace." Lucy took his hand, the same rough, calloused hand she had first held all those years ago. "We taught each other. I learned about trust from you, about letting someone truly see me. I learned that love does not have to be complicated or dramatic. Sometimes it is just sitting on a porch at sunset with the person who knows you best in the world." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared and the stars emerged. From inside the house, they could hear their children getting ready for bed, their voices and laughter floating through the open windows. "We did good," Daniel said. "Look at what we built." Lucy looked around at the house Daniel had built with his own hands, at the land they had made into a home, at the life they had created together. "We did very good." Over the next decade, their children grew into young adults. William went to work with his father, showing the same gift with horses. Catherine indeed became a teacher, following in Lucy's footsteps. Henry, after settling down from his wild youth, became a rancher. All three married and started families of their own. In 1905, Lucy and Daniel became grandparents for the first time when William and his wife had a daughter. Holding her granddaughter for the first time, Lucy felt the circle of life completing. She was 55 now, with silver threads in her blonde hair, but she felt young in the ways that mattered. Daniel was 59, his dark hair mostly gray, but his eyes were still the same whiskey brown that had captured her heart all those years ago. They had slowed down in some ways. Lucy had retired from teaching a few years earlier, passing the schoolhouse on to a younger woman. Daniel no longer worked with the wildest horses, focusing instead on training and breeding. But they were still active, still engaged with their community and their growing family. On their 30th anniversary in 1908, their children threw them a party. The whole town came, it seemed. People told stories about Lucy's teaching, about Daniel's skills with horses, about the love story everyone had watched unfold over 3 decades. "I always knew you two were meant to be together," Mrs. Weaver said. She was elderly now, but still sharp. "The way you looked at each other, even in those early days, that is a once-in-a-lifetime kind of love." That night, alone in their bedroom, Daniel held Lucy close. 30 years, he marveled. "It feels like no time at all and like forever all at once. I know exactly what you mean. If I could go back and do it all again, I would not change a single thing. Every moment, good and bad, brought us here. Even the hard times," Lucy asked. There had been hard times over the years, lean winters and sick children and all the normal struggles of life. Especially the hard times. They showed me what we were made of. They proved that what we had was real and strong enough to weather anything. Lucy thought about that frightened young woman who had stepped off the train in 1882, so sure she knew what she wanted but really having no idea. If she could go back and tell that young woman anything, what would she say? "I would tell myself to trust," she said aloud. "Tell who?" "Myself back then. If I could give my younger self advice, I would say to trust. Trust the journey, trust the people you meet, trust your heart." "Would you tell yourself about me?" "No, that would ruin the surprise. And what a wonderful surprise you were, Daniel Everett." He kissed her, soft and sweet, and Lucy marveled that after 30 years, his kiss could still make her heart race. They had more good years together. They watched their grandchildren grow, eventually adding more to the count until they had 8 grandchildren between their 3 children. They took trips, visiting places they had always wanted to see. They spent quiet evenings reading together, Daniel still pursuing his love of learning that Lucy had awakened in him decades before. When Lucy was 67 and Daniel was 71, he had a heart attack while working in their barn. Lucy found him there, and for a terrifying few hours, she thought she might lose him. But he pulled through, though the doctor warned he needed to take things easier. "I am not ready to leave you," Daniel told her from his sick bed. "We have more life to live yet." And they did. Daniel recovered, and while he had to move slower, he was still himself. They had 5 more good years together before Daniel passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1920, at the age of 76. Lucy grieved deeply. He had been her partner for 38 years, more than half her life. The house felt empty without him, without his voice reading to her in the evenings, without his presence beside her in bed. But she was not alone. Her children and grandchildren rallied around her, and she found comfort in their love. She lived on for 7 more years, staying in the house Daniel had built, tending the garden they had planted together. She wrote her memoirs, wanting to preserve the story of their love for future generations. She told the story of boarding that train in Boston, of meeting a cowboy who said, in his way, "Teach me how to love you right." and how they had spent a lifetime doing exactly that, teaching each other about love every single day. Lucy Barrett Everett died in her sleep in 1927 at the age of 77. She was buried next to Daniel in the Las Vegas cemetery under a headstone that read, "Together forever, as we always were." At her funeral, their children and grandchildren spoke of her legacy. Catherine, following in her mother's footsteps as a teacher, talked about Lucy's dedication to education and how she had changed countless lives over her years in the classroom. William spoke of the love between his parents, how it had been the foundation of their family. Henry, the wild one who had settled down, talked about his mother's courage in leaving everything she knew to build a new life in the West. But perhaps the most touching tribute came from a very old woman in the back of the church. It was Emma Carson, now in her 70s herself, who had been that little girl who loved to read. She stood up and said, "Miss Barrett, I will always think of her as Miss Barrett even though she became Mrs. Everett. She changed my life. She saw something in me that I did not see in myself. She gave me books and encouragement and belief. And because of her, I became a teacher too, and I tried to give to my students what she gave to me. She taught us all how to love learning, how to love our community, and through her example with Mr. Everett, she taught us how to love each other. That is a legacy that will never die." In the years that followed, the story of Lucy and Daniel became part of Las Vegas lore. People spoke of the Eastern teacher who came west and fell in love with a cowboy, of how they had built a life and a family together, of the love that had sustained them through 4 decades. The schoolhouse, where Lucy had taught for so many years, was eventually named the Barrett School in her honor. The house Daniel had built still stood, occupied by their descendants, a testament to the solid foundation they had laid. Their great-grandchildren grew up hearing stories about Lucy and Daniel, about how she had taught him to read and he had taught her to ride, about how they had sat on their porch every evening, watching the sunset and talking about their day, about how, even after decades of marriage, they still held hands like newlyweds, about how their love had been the kind that songs were written about, stories were told about, the kind that inspired others to believe in the possibility of true and lasting love. And in a tin box stored in the family archives, among photographs and letters and mementos, was Lucy's journal from that first year in Las Vegas. In it, in her neat teacher's handwriting, was an entry from September 1882, just days after she had arrived. "I came west to teach, to make a difference, to find a life bigger than the one I left behind. I did not expect to find love, but life, I am learning, is full of unexpected gifts. There is a cowboy here, Daniel Everett, who looked at a wild horse with such patience and understanding. I find myself wondering if a man who can gentle a frightened animal with nothing but kindness might also be able to reach a frightened heart. I suppose only time will tell." And time had told the most beautiful story of all. The story of a teacher and a cowboy, of patience and learning, of trust and growth, of a love that started with uncertainty and grew into something that lasted beyond a lifetime. It was the story of 2 people who taught each other everything that mattered, who built a life together one day at a time, who loved each other right every single day, and whose legacy of love echoed through the generations that followed. The schoolhouse still stood in Las Vegas, Nevada, a century after Lucy Barrett first stepped into it. The town had grown and changed, but the building remained, preserved as a historical landmark. Tourists came to see where the famous teacher had educated generations of children. Plaques on the walls told the story of Lucy and Daniel, of their courtship and marriage, of the life they had built together. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun set over the Nevada desert, People walking past the old schoolhouse swore they could almost see them. A young woman in a long dress and a tall cowboy with a gentle smile, sitting together and watching the sky turn colors, their hands intertwined, their love as present as it had been more than a century before. Because some love stories do not end with death. Some love stories become part of the land itself, woven into the fabric of a place, inspiring generation after generation to believe in the transformative power of love, patience, and two hearts willing to teach each other how to love right.